Immortal Empires is available to owners of any of the games in the Total War Warhammer series. That means that it's never been easier to access the biggest sandbox on the market, but that doesn't mean things are so simple. This literal world can be confusing to dive straight into, so let's go through a beginner's guide to Immortal Empires to get you started. First off, let's answer the question, what is Immortal Empires? This might be obvious to those of you who've been playing the series for years, but to anyone that's new, Immortal Empires is essentially the magnum opus of Total War Warhammer maps. It combines the best parts of Warhammer 1, 2 and 3 maps and crams them all together to make what is essentially the entirety of the Warhammer world on a single continuous map. That means you have everything from the southern tip of Lustria to the northernmost point of the Chaos Wastes, and if you so choose, you can march from one end to the other all over the course of a single campaign. That's over 300 different settlements, and each one is inhabited by a faction, theoretically each with their own focus, playstyle and goals. I say theoretically since Warhammer 3 AI has a bit of a habit of sitting idle until the player arrives, so depending on who we're talking about here and where they are, their mileage may vary. Still, there's hundreds of different factions all over the map, and any one of them can declare war on any of the others. This all adds up to what is admittedly one of the biggest and most interesting sandbox experiences you can find in a strategy game. If you've watched many of my other videos, and specifically the podcast, then you'll know that the issues with Warhammer 3 are numerous, and Immortal Empires is not immune to that. But even so, I have to admit, it's the largest and most interesting map I've ever seen in a strategy game. However, with something so large, getting around it can be quite a challenge. The options for getting around in Immortal Empires vary from faction to faction, with some having the option to teleport around and even set up permanent gates to access each area of the map. However, for the most part, your main methods of movement will be marching and sailing with your armies. This sounds fairly simple, but with terrain so varied, it can actually be a lot harder and slower than it first may seem. Mountains and rivers can slow your progress significantly, difficult coastlines can restrict your entry to land, and of course all of this allows armies to hold choke points and create ambushes for unsuspecting forces. Certain factions will have access to movement stances to mitigate certain obstacles, such as underways for getting past difficult terrain, but you'll always have to bear the constraints of the map in mind when getting around. This isn't even mentioning things such as trespassing in the lands of other factions, or even attacking their settlements. Most of the time you are moving, it will be to get to a hostile settlement or army, and by understanding the terrain and how certain factions navigate it, you'll be able to attack in a way to provide the greatest possible advantage to yourself. Setting ambushes in narrow areas and baiting enemies towards you is always a good plan to turn any battle to your advantage. Utilizing shortcuts or other movement stances to outflank an enemy and take their settlement from under their nose will allow you to cut out your enemy's legs from under them. I can't possibly explain every single instance on a map so large, but pay attention to how your armies move around the map to understand the path most travelled, as that will almost always be what the AI takes as it moves. Outside of standard movement stances, there's one option to get around the map quickly that everyone has access to, and that's the sea lanes. These are points on the oceans of the world that allow near instant travel to distant areas of the map. As it stands, there are currently 5 sea lanes accessible to every faction, and 3 of those begin in the east coast of Cathay. They can take you to the north of Lustria, the south of Lustria, or the Elven colonies to the southeast of the Old World. There's another off the southern tip of Naggaroth that allows you to travel to the north near the Chaos Wastes, and one on the border between the Chaos Dwarf Wastelands and the Mountains of Morn that allows you to travel to the bottom of the Chaos Wastes. Each of these, you simply move your army into them and they'll appear out the other side after a number of turns. They are a little bit niche, but if you're wanting to explore more of the map, they're a quick way to get around and see the many terrains and races in-game. Speaking of which, there are near countless legendary lords to choose from in-game and 24 different races, each with their own distinct playstyles. If you're coming into Immortal Empires for the first time, it can be pretty overwhelming to understand who's who, how they work, and even how you'll be able to play them. So to make things simple, I'll go through each race, give you a brief overview of their playstyle along with how to get access to them in-game. And this is all assuming you already have access to Immortal Empires by owning one of the 3 games in the series. If you want more detailed guides on how each faction works, I have a whole playlist on my channel, so be sure to check it out. The Beastmen are all about constant aggression, both on the campaign map where they raise the world to feed their bloodgrounds, and in battle, where their high mobility and mass allow them to literally bowl straight through enemies. You can access them by purchasing the Call of the Beastmen DLC, or the Silence and the Fury. Bretonnia are all about chivalry and managing their peasantry to maximise their economy. Their roster is focused on cavalry, with some of the strongest mounted units in the game, and a whole lot of micromanagement. You can access them by owning Warhammer 1. The The Chaos Dwarves are hands down the most complex race in Immortal Empires. Their economy production chain requires them to harvest immense amounts of resources using even more immense amounts of captured labour. And their roster is full of heavy armour and heavier firepower alongside a healthy smattering of monsters and cavalry. You can access them through the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves DLC. The Demons of Chaos are a unique, albeit underbaked race. You can dedicate yourself to each flavour of chaos to unlock a vast number of parts to customise your very own Demon Lord, and fill their armies with demons from all corners of the Chaos Pantheon. You can access them by owning Warhammer 3. The Dark Elves are another faction that enjoys the fruits of harvested labour, alongside mastering the waterways with their black arcs. Their armies have a balanced mix of front lines, missiles, monsters, with a strong focus on aggression over defence. You can access them by owning Warhammer 2, the Shadow and the Blade, or the Queen and the Crone. The Dwarves are all about settling grudges, whether that's minor transgressions accumulated over the course of a few turns, or age-old betrayals that demand to be righted. Their roster is similar to their Chaos Brethren, albeit much more focused on technology than monsters. You can access them by owning Warhammer 1, Thrones of Decay, or the King and the Warlord. The Empire are the most popular race in all of Total War Warhammer because they're the most approachable to new players in the series. They are the forces of humanity with a strong focus on maintaining order wherever they go. Their armies are full of a balance of infantry, cavalry, and lots of firepower. You can access them by owning Warhammer 1, Thrones of Decay, the Hunter and the Beast, or the Grim and the Grave. Grand Cathay are a race all about harmony in all things. From their settlements to their army, everything must remain in balance. Their roster is similar to the Empire with a good mix of most things, alongside a few monstrous additions and some very powerful lords. You can access them by owning Warhammer 3 or Shadows of Change. The Greenskins are another race focused on pure aggression. Their wars allow them to double the size of their military and overwhelm enemies with a tide of green. Their roster maintains that aggression with powerful melee troops and monsters. You can access them by owning Warhammer 1, Omens of Destruction, the Warden and the Paunch, or the King and the Warlord. The High Elves are my pick for the best faction for a new player. With their playstyle focused on cooperation with other High Elves and defending their homeland, they make for an excellent controlled campaign in a smaller area, perfect for your first game. Their roster is similar to the Dark Elves, but more focused on defense and range superiority. You can access them by owning Warhammer 2, Tides of Torment, the Warden and the Paunch, or the Queen and the Crone. Khorne is all about constant battle to harvest as many skulls as possible to lay atop the Skull Throne. Their roster is all about constant aggression in melee with very few options for range damage. You can access them by owning Warhammer 3 or Omens of Destruction. Kislev are all about protecting their motherland and fighting back the forces of chaos. Playing them will see you involved in a political race, make use of atamans to empower your provinces, and train powerful casters for use in your armies. Their roster is all about versatility, with many of their units being able to attack both from a range and in melee, along with a healthy dose of bears and other beasts. You can access them by owning Warhammer 3 or Shadows of Change. The Lizardmen are all working towards the Great Plan, which seems to involve taking a bunch of settlements to empower their geomantic web for better commandments. Their roster is extremely powerful in melee, both from their infantry and monsters, alongside some very powerful magic. You can access them by owning Warhammer 2, the Prophet and the Warlock, the Hunter and the Beast, or the Silence and the Fury. The recently reworked Norska are all about building altars to each of their dark gods in exchange for a number of powerful rewards, as well as hunting down monsters to tame them for use in their armies. Their roster is a mix of monsters and monster hunters, with powerful infantry and skirmishing units, fighting alongside mammoths, trolls, and all other manner of beasties. You can access them by owning the Norska DLC or Tides of Torment. Nurgle has a strong focus on crafting plagues to not only empower yourself, but weaken your enemies. Their unique approach to settlements and recruitment sees them making use of cyclical buildings and recruiting en masse, but slowly growing in strength, like a cold that just won't quit. Their roster is the embodiment of the creeping death. They are generally quite slow but nearly impossible to kill, all the while they chip away their enemies with poison aplenty. You can access them by owning Warhammer 3 or Thrones of Decay. The Ogre Kingdoms have a focus on building ogre camps around the map, giving them access to the full power of the roster. To make proper use of these, they'll need to collect as much meat as possible, alongside keeping some for offerings for the Great Maw. Their roster is a mixture of weaker Noblar units, often holding enemies still for a devastating charge from their various ogres and other monstrous units. You can access them by owning Warhammer 3 or Omens of Destruction. The Skaven love to sneak around and turn every battle in their favour with their ambush stance. You'll need to manage food to ensure the Vermintide remains fed, and make use of undercities to take over settlements from the inside, or simply leech them for all they are worth. Their roster may be low in leadership, but they always come back and in greater numbers. They have strong units in almost every category, but most notably their weapons teams and monsters. You can access them by owning Warhammer 2, the Prophet and the Warlock, the Shadow and the Blade, or the Twisted and the Twilight. Slaanesh factions are all about seduction in its many forms, whether that means tempting enemy units to fight for you in combat, or even vassalizing entire factions under your influence. They never turn off the Riz. Their roster is all about speed and momentum with a huge number of cavalry and chariot units alongside plenty of monsters. You can access them by owning Warhammer 3 or Tides of Torment. The Tomb Kings have a one-of-a-kind playstyle with no recruitment or upkeep costs, but limited units and armies. Alongside this, they have limited income and instead focus on canopic jars, which they can exchange for powerful items and units. Their roster is quite balanced, with plenty of powerful infantry, ranged units and monsters, or in this case, constructs. You can access them by owning the Rise of the Tomb Kings DLC. Siege has a focus on trickery and manipulations through their changing of the ways to essentially screw the AI in all kinds of ways. Their roster is tanky thanks to their barrier and is full of powerful casters and missile troops. You can access them by owning Warhammer 3 or Shadows of Change. The Vampire Coast seek to raise their reputation as the most infamous pirates in all the land and to collect treasures and sea shantyverses to empower their factions. Their roster is all about gunpowder with a nice helping of monsters to keep things varied. You can access them by owning the Curse of the Vampire Coast DLC. The Vampire Counts are the original undead faction and my all-time favourite. They're experts at raising the dead, especially after large battles, meaning they're very difficult to put away for good. Their roster is focused almost entirely on melee, with strong infantry and monsters propped up by their powerful healing and spell support from their lords and heroes. You can access them by owning Warhammer 1 or the Grim and the Grave. The Warriors of Chaos are the apocalypse of the Warhammer world and seek to bring that to anyone in sight, whether that's dominating the tribes of Norsca or raising the world of order. They'll do it all to gain favour with their gods. Their roster is full of powerful infantry and devastating monsters, with almost all units focusing entirely on melee. You can access them by owning the Chaos Warriors DLC or the Champions of Chaos. And finally, the Wood Elves, who focus entirely on capturing and healing magical forests all over the map to empower their faction and the Oak of Ages. Their roster is focused on sneaky skirmishing ranged units alongside powerful shock cavalry and the odd monsters. You can access them by owning the Wood Elves DLC or the Twisted and the Twilight. As for my recommendation, each race and even faction has their own merits, but if you wanted my advice on where to start, honestly, Warhammer 1 probably has my favourite group of factions to get you started, but if you are already in Immortal Empires and want a DLC, Thrones of Decay is hard to beat. Powerful and fun lords for the Empire, Dwarves and Nurgle, alongside a great selection of units. Once you are in Immortal Empires, you might wonder what exactly to do. Whilst the way each campaign flows generally points you in a direction, since it is a sandbox, there isn't a whole lot of direction outside of endless conquest with whoever you run into. The AI also tends to have a wee bit of bias against the player, and whilst it's not as bad as it has been, you're still likely to find yourself getting dogpiled more often than not, which can be disheartening, especially when you're getting started. Now, whilst we can't really fix the AI issue, there is a single mod that I think everyone should install that helps give campaigns a lot more direction. And if you think mods are confusing, I'll even walk you through how to install it. As far as I know, this only works on Steam, but someone please correct me in the comments if not. So in Steam, go to Warhammer 3 and click Workshop. In the search bar, type Victory and hit Enter. You should see a bunch of mods with the same icon with this big VCO logo on it. Pick the one that's in your language, and if you want a link to the English version of the mod, it'll be in the description. Click subscribe, and your Total War game should do a small update. Once finished, launch the game, and if you get this Steam selection menu, just pick Play Total War Warhammer. In the launcher, click on the mod manager, and simply enable Victory Conditions Overhaul. With that, you can hit play and the game should launch as normal, only now when you go to Faction Select, there'll be a new symbol. Any Lord that has this symbol next to them on the Lord Select will have new victory conditions, and whilst it varies depending on the updates, this is normally most of the Lords in game. When you load into the campaign, you can now see under the Victory Conditions menu that you have a new selection of thematic victory conditions with powerful rewards and even a bit of lore. So, for Vlad von Carstein before, it was own your starting provinces, capture Altdorf and attack a bunch of settlements. Boring! But with the mod, he now has 3 options to take on the Empire, the Dwarves or Kislev. Most of these options are things you would probably end up doing anyway, but they give you some nice story to think about whilst you do it, alongside explicit direction and, most importantly, worthwhile rewards. I highly recommend this mod to anyone playing Immortal Empires, as it really does make campaigns a lot more fun when you have something to work towards. Outside of attacking a billion settlements, of course. And bear in mind that this is just a single mod and there are countless more in the workshop to check out and enhance your experience even further. Immortal Empires is a sandbox, and a vanilla experience is pretty good, but with mods, you can make it even better and really transform it into the ultimate Total War Warhammer experience, at least until the End Times DLC comes out. But that's everything I have for this beginner's guide to Immortal Empires. Let me know in the comments who you're planning on playing for your next campaign, whether it's your first or 1000th. Like the video if you did, subscribe for more, and if you want more videos like this, then check out my best lords for every race in Warhammer 3 so you can see which campaigns to play next.